You are listening to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, episode 249. Welcome to the Overcome Pornography for Good podcast, where we take a research-based, trauma-informed, and results-focused approach to quitting porn. This approach has been revolutionary and changed thousands and thousands of lives. I'm your host, Sarah Brewer.
Hey, welcome to the podcast, Overcome Pornography for Good. I'm Kat Jenkins. I am going to share with you some things today about shame. I know we've talked a lot about shame on the podcast. Sarah has shared many things about it, and it's one of the first things we talk about with our clients, one of the first things we typically work through, because if we're in shame, it's really hard to move forward in any of the other milestones that we talk about in a meaningful way. So today we're going to kind of explore shame in a little different way. We're going to understand kind of that there's two parts to shame. There's shame in terms of this context of shame, this external part, and then there's our perception of shame. And so that's what we're going to explore today. We're going to explore these two sides of shame. And so let's start with talking about shame as a context, right? It's like the soil that conditions shame. It's this external thing that's around us that we've been taught. Okay. So it comes from things like the family systems. It could come from the culture that we live in. It can come from society or religious institutions. Brene Brown has done a ton of research about shame, and she says that shame is a social emotion rooted in fear of disconnection. So understanding that there's this context that we've been taught about shame, it teaches us that we want to belong. And if we don't belong, then we feel a lot of shame about who we are, about how we're showing up in the world. Our religious institutions might even teach us to feel shame about how we show up, like especially in this particular area of porn, right? Like we do not belong if we are viewing porn. And so we feel a lot of shame, right? Because we might feel shunned. We're feeling disconnected. So we have the fear of that. So we've been taught to feel shame, right? So this might sound something like these conditional belonging messages that you might hear in some of these institutions might sound like. It's interesting because this could either be said specifically, or it could be interpreted as, right? So it might sound like you are worthy if you are successful. You're worthy if you're thin. You're worthy if you're perfect. You're worthy if you don't view porn, right? So we might be taught that. Stay in line, right? Don't look at porn. That's not something that we do here. And so if and when we do, we feel disconnected from that society, from that place, from that family institution, if we're doing something that doesn't fit within those norms. And so we feel shame. So shame as this contextual thing, like has been taught to us externally. Okay. Helen Lewis also pioneered the idea that shame is this relational emotion. So it arises when our sense of self is exposed or rejected in the eyes of others, right? So we want to kind of understand how porn is sort of this breeding ground for shame. Because within this context of the world and the society that we live in and maybe our religious institutions, it's been taught to us in many, many different ways. So we feel that. We feel exposed, rejected if someone finds out about what we're doing. And so I want you guys to think of this sort of as a separate piece of shame. So this is just one side that we've been taught. So then there's also this other side, this internal side, our perception, what we feel when shame comes up, right? This internal place. So let's talk a little bit about our perception of shame. So once we've kind of lived through these contexts of shame and what we were taught, it starts to take root inside of us. And then shame is how we see ourselves, right? How we judge ourselves, how we talk about ourselves. It shapes our perception. It shapes our self-concept. And our nervous system responds to those. We have responses within ourselves to the threats that might be coming from society and from those norms that we've been taught contextually about shame, right? And so we're feeling it totally on the inside through how we perceive ourselves, through our self-concepts and our self-confidence in ourselves. Our nervous system shows us that in the way that we respond to the things that we do and how we feel that shame. So let's talk a little bit about how it shows up. So there's like our internal lens, right? So this shame warps our perception into I am wrong, I am defective, I am unworthy, rather than I did something wrong. I did something that was bad, right? So no, we've talked a little bit about that on this podcast before, right? Difference between shame and guilt. And when we are in that perception of shame and we're looking through that lens, we only see it as I am wrong. I am bad. I did this thing, right? Instead of I did something wrong. So that's one way that it shows up. Again, we talked about that nervous system. Our body responds. So it might feel like shrinking. It might feel like hiding. It might feel like freezing. So the nervous system attempts to protect us from that rejection, that context of shame that rejects us. Our nervous system shows up through this perception of shame inside of us and it shuts down. It freezes, right? And we want to hide. So our body responds to how we feel. Another way is sort of this neuroscience of shame. So in the polyvagal theory, we learned that shame triggers our dorsal vagal shutdown or our freeze response, right? So we're feeling that within our body, but it is what happens. Our body will respond immediately by shutting down and freezing, where it will withdraw. We avoid social threats, right? We avoid being around people. We avoid maybe church situations. We avoid family situations if those feel threatening. We avoid those places because we're in this freeze response. So chronic shame literally conditions the nervous system to anticipate rejection. So once we kind of get into this pattern of where shame kind of takes that center role for us, we condition ourselves to feel that immediately. It anticipates that we're going to be rejected. And so we automatically freeze without thinking about it, without even having any sort of, mental capacity to stop it, because we've created this cycle within us. And so our body just wants to respond by freezing, by trying to protect us. Okay. This also happens to us on this internal perception of shame is we distort the meaning of neutral events. So we find evidence for our unworthiness in different things. So it might not even just be with our porn habit. It might come in different ways. Like you might text, your partner or a friend and they don't text you back and you think, oh, I must have done something wrong. I'm so stupid. I must have messed up somehow. And then we find evidence of that in other places. Not just in our porn habit, but in other places as well. So we start to distort the meaning of things within us just because, and make it mean it's because of this. And that's all coming because of our perception of shame. And it's all coming internally. So we kind of talked a little bit about this, but we also start to self-identify through this filter of shame, right? We interpret experiences through the shame lens and we tend to carry it forward even when this original shaming context is no longer present. So maybe, for instance, remember we talk about this context of shame comes from these external places such as our, maybe our family in which we grew up, maybe the religious institutions in which we were brought up. And we might move from and leave those places, right? We grow up, we leave our parents' home, we move to college, we live somewhere else, but we will tend to carry this forward with us. This original shaming context comes with us. It doesn't stop. It doesn't end when we move out or if we left a church or if we went to a different church. Those concepts of shame that we were taught back then, we carry them with us and then we start to look through that lens of shame in everything that we do and who we believe that we are. So notice how shame is personalized. It becomes the way that we interpret and filter the world. And it doesn't matter. We try to leave it. We try to get up and go and leave it behind. But unfortunately, those things, we carry them with us. They come. And so research shows that the social shame, that context of shame, right? It creates the internalized shame, our perception of shame. And then the internalized shame reinforces social conformity. So we have these two parts that are feeding upon each other. They are actually the feeding ground for more shame, is one leads to another. It's almost like how we talk about the shame cycle. This is part of the shame cycle and why it feels so hard to get out, because they are feeding on each other as we stay within the contexts, and we believe those. Like I said, we try to leave them. We might try to leave them behind, but they follow us. And then we perceive through our own, eyes, and internally we feel it, and it creates more of us wanting to be socially aligned, and it reinforces, and now we're stuck in sort of this loop. So these two parts, though they are different, they feed on each other. So understanding both of these parts and where they come from can be really helpful as we start to heal, because we want to make that there's this distinction, because healing happens a little differently and it helps us to break that cycle. So understanding that as we're healing shame, that there's not just this one way, that there's a couple different ways that we can kind of tackle this, can be super helpful too. So let's first talk about how we might be able to help to heal contextual shame. Okay, so we want to remember this is our external world around us, the things that we've been taught. So the way that we want to do this is we want to start to create external awareness. We want to be more aware about those external things. So we might ask questions like, who taught me this? Right? Where did this come from? What system benefits from me feeling ashamed? What were those teachings? Right? Name the shame for what it is. Is this shame coming from my family system? Is it coming from the culture that I live in? Is it a message from the church or the religion in which I have participated? Just gaining more awareness. All we're doing is creating awareness. We're not pointing or blaming or, creating more shame in this place, but we are just wanting to create that awareness around it so that we can start to understand it better. Because the more we understand it, the more we shine light on shame, the less power shame has over us. So the last question we might want to ask ourselves is something like, do I want to keep this? Now that I kind of understand this a little bit more, now that I understand where it's coming from, it was external, it was taught to me, do I want to keep it? We get to decide. Now that we're adults, we get to decide, what do I want to do with this information? So that's how we're going to start to heal the shame that was taught us, the shame that was given to us by others. We start to create that external awareness, and then we question it and we ask ourselves, do I want this? Now let's talk a little bit about how we're going to heal from the perception of shame. So the reason that we want to do this, right, just like creating external awareness helps us with the contextual shame, we want to create internal freedom because, like we talked about, it kind of takes over. Our nervous system gets habituated to that way. And before anything is even done or said, even sometimes we might even have a thought about porn and we already feel the shame of that. And it starts to create this really heavy loop, and we're not free. So what we want to do is we want to start to create some internal freedom around this. So questions we might ask ourselves to help with some healing would be, how am I seeing this through shame's lens right now? What would I see without it? What if I took off these shame glasses, right? Like I put my shame glasses on and I'm always looking at the world through these shame lenses. What if I took them off? What would I see? What else is there that I'm not seeing because I'm wearing them, right? We also might want to challenge our inner critic because it can be strong, especially when we've been in these patterns for a long time. We can start to ask ourselves, just like we asked in healing contextual shame, who taught me this? We could also ask, whose voice is this? Is this my voice? Because we are carrying those patterns with us. And so as they've been internalized, we might take that voice from society, from our family, from somewhere else, from a religion standpoint, and we might make that our own voice and think that it's ours. So we want to start questioning that. Like, whose voice is this? Where did I get this? Where did I learn this? Right? Like, we want to start asking that. And we want to start replacing with a kinder voice, something softer, something more compassionate. It might sound like, I'm learning. I'm trying to figure this out. I am worthy even if I make mistakes, right? We start to offer ourselves a much more compassionate voice than the shame-filled contextual voice of shame that was given to us and taught us. Some other ways that we could, since we were talking a little bit about self-compassion, Kristen Neff did tons of research about self-compassion, and you could go to selfcompassion.org. That's her website. She has lots of kind of exercises that you can do and different meditations that could be helpful, especially if you're feeling like you're really not very good at showing yourself self-compassion, which makes so much sense if that's you. And learning to speak to yourself kindly takes some time. So we want to make sure that we are hopefully building space for that in our lives, building space for that in the way that we speak to ourselves. I like to use the phrase, of course you feel this way, but you're safe now. You're going to be okay. Kind of not only to offer that self-compassionate voice, but also to offer our nervous system some relief from the kind of freeze response that we go into when shame comes up. You're safe. You're going to be okay. Everything's fine. Because we don't know that. Our body doesn't know that. Our nervous system doesn't really understand that. That's why it jumps out and it freezes. Because we don't feel safe when we are alone, and we feel like we're going to be rejected when somebody finds out about something that feels shameful, especially in the realm of porn. So we need to remind ourselves, you are safe. You're going to be okay. Everything's fine. Okay. So that's one thing you can do. The last thing that I want to share with you about how we can start to heal some of this internal shame is doing some somatic release. Not just mental, because I mean, all those words and the way that we talk to ourselves and our critical voice is kind of all up in our head. And so we want to start practicing letting go of some of those phrases in our head, but it's not just the mental part. It's also stored in our body, right? Like we said, our nervous system just takes over and it freezes. So we want to notice what happens when shame hits. We want to be aware of that. Not only do we create awareness around the contextual shame that's coming at us, but we also want to be way more aware about our internal world and what's happening when shame hits us. So what happens to my body when shame hits? Maybe there's some slumping. Maybe there's some tightness in the chest. Maybe we start to feel some heat in our face or some embarrassment, right? So we want to just notice what's going on for us, and then we want to try some gentle grounding techniques. It might look like, especially maybe you feel it in your jaw. And so maybe a gentle grounding technique would be to unclench your jaw. I love the hand to the heart. If you've ever heard me do any coaching, I'm always like, hand to the heart. And so putting your hand to your heart, maybe just letting yourself know that, giving yourself reassurance. I'm here. I see you. Breathing deep breaths into that belly, doing some yoga breathing so that we can actually feel it in our vagus nerve. That's going to help calm that nervous system, right? It's going to be part of that somatic release that we can do that's inside our body. So you could also try yoga, shaking, dancing, kind of moving, letting your body kind of give you an idea of what it needs when you start to feel and see what is coming up for you as the shame hits. So those are some ideas for you. I just think it's so important that we are aware that there's more than one way that shame can really hit us. Understanding that there is different ways that shame has been introduced in our life. Some of that is outside of us. Some of that was taught to us by the places that we were, by society at large. And we've been carrying it. We've been carrying it for ourselves, but we don't have to carry it anymore. It doesn't have to be yours. You can start to question it. We can start to learn different ways. We can start to think in different ways, think for ourselves and choose how we want to portray who we are and what comes at us. So, and that includes the internal world as well. So we've talked about those different shame pieces, shame in terms of context, external world, shames in terms of our perception of shame, as we've internalized what was taught to us and how we now see through the lens of shame, and sort of some ways that we can heal and kind of let go of those things that were given to us and that we've also just taken upon ourselves. If you guys have any questions, if you need any help with shame, please reach out. This is a place we never want you to stay, is sitting in shame, because that is the place where we get stuck and then we don't move forward and then we don't ever feel like we're going to overcome pornography. And that is not helpful and it's not true. And it's so not true. We can totally do this. If you need help though, reach out, let us know. I just wanted to offer too, there's so many different podcasts that Sarah has done about shame. And so if you are looking for more resources about it, go find those other podcasts, listen to them. Know that you don't have to be stuck in this. We love you. Have a great week. And we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for stopping by.
I want to invite you to come and listen to my free class, How to Overcome Pornography for Good Without Using Willpower. We talk about how to stop giving into urges without pure willpower or relying on phone filters so that you can actually stop wanting pornography. We talk about how to stop giving up after a few weeks or months. And spoiler alert, the answer isn't have more willpower. And then lastly, we talk about how to make a life without porn easily sustainable and permanent. If you're trying to quit porn, this class is a game changer. So you can go and sign up at sarahbrewer.com/masterclass, and it is totally free.